This past week saw a major shift in the already tense relationship between Israel and Iran, as Israel launched a strategic military strike targeting specific Iranian sites. These airstrikes, aimed primarily at Iran's military infrastructure, mark a notable development in an increasingly complex regional conflict. Official statements from both governments have been limited, leading to a surge in speculation and unverified reports from various international outlets. In this analysis, we will break down the details of the strike, examine its immediate effects, and review the responses from Iran, Israel, and their global allies. A look at the strike, Israel's aims, and Iran's response. On October 26th, Israel reportedly executed coordinated airstrikes on key Iranian military facilities, focusing on installations suspected of posing a direct threat to Israeli security. The targets included air defense systems, radar installations, and missile production sites across multiple Iranian provinces. Despite a history of heated exchanges and hostile encounters, Israel stated that this operation aimed at containing conflict rather than escalating it. By avoiding nuclear facilities, Israel signaled an intention to limit the scope of the attack to military assets actively involved in perceived threats to Israel's security. Iran's official stance, however, downplayed the extent of damage, with Iranian authorities asserting that minimal harm was done to infrastructure. Iranian officials advised citizens to follow only government-sanctioned sources to avoid falling prey to misinformation circulating in the media. Diverging Western reactions, a tale of two viewpoints. The response from Western countries has revealed significant ideological divides. In the United States and among certain allied nations, Israel's strike was generally viewed as a defensive necessity. Many conservative commentators supported the action, citing Iran's influence through regional proxies and missile development as a persistent threat that justifies Israel's preemptive measures. These voices argue that Israel's operations serve as a stabilizing force in the Middle East, noting Iran's previous attacks on regional targets, including Gulf states and U.S. forces in Iraq. In Europe, however, there was a noticeable call for restraint, especially among left-leaning circles that traditionally advocate for diplomatic solutions to regional tensions. European officials and analysts emphasized the importance of reducing hostilities through diplomacy rather than military intervention. They warn that the use of force in such a volatile environment risks further destabilization. This faction advocates for a broader diplomatic initiative involving regional and international actors to manage rising tensions. Some European leaders stressed the importance of protecting civilian areas, urging all parties to observe humanitarian standards. Perspectives from BRICS and Africa. Among BRICS nations and in the African media, Israel's actions have been met with a critical reception. Russia strongly condemned the strikes, with President Vladimir Putin denouncing both Israel's actions in Iran and the ongoing conflict in Gaza. Russian media has covered Iran's response closely, spotlighting Tehran's calls for BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization to address what it describes as Israel's aggressive acts in Palestine and beyond. South African and other sub-Saharan media similarly voiced concerns about the impact of Israel's actions on an already unstable region. Articles from these regions have emphasized the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, questioning how further military escalation could affect long-term stability and BRICS's own regional initiatives. China has maintained a relatively neutral position, calling on both Israel and Iran to exercise restraint. As a major energy consumer with strategic investments in the Middle East, China's stance reflects its interest in preventing disruptions that could affect the region's stability and its Belt and Road Initiative. The Chinese government has reiterated its support for peaceful conflict resolution, highlighting the importance of stability for China's economic and geopolitical interests in the area. India's response was similarly measured, with officials from the Ministry of External Affairs urging for peace and stability. Given India's significant population in the Middle East and reliance on regional energy imports, it faces considerable risks if tensions worsen. Indian authorities have expressed concerns over the potential fallout on their diaspora, as well as broader economic and diplomatic repercussions. Turkey, the Gulf states, and regional alliances. Turkey, with a historically complex relationship with Israel and strong ties to the Middle East, was quick to denounce the airstrikes. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan condemned Israel's actions, calling for a united front among Middle Eastern nations against what he termed Israeli aggression. Erdogan's response was likely shaped by his pro-Palestinian stance and his ambition to counter Israeli influence in the region. He further called on countries like Russia and Iran to resist Israel's presence in Syria and Iraq. Saudi Arabia, meanwhile, took a more moderate position, urging restraint and calling for regional stability. Saudi officials expressed concern that continued hostilities could exacerbate tensions, destabilizing the broader region. The United Arab Emirates, UAE, which normalized relations with Israel in 2020, also called for caution, underscoring dialogue as the best way forward to prevent further deterioration. The UAE's response reflects its delicate balance of maintaining relations with Israel while supporting peace initiatives within the region. Iraq strongly condemned Israel's use of Iraqi airspace under U.S. control for attacks on Iran. Iraqi authorities described this as a violation of sovereignty and filed a complaint with the United Nations, asking the international community to address what it views as a destabilizing action. Iran's military and diplomatic response. In a statement, Iran alleged that Israel used Iraqi airspace for its strikes. According to Iranian military officials, Israeli jets launched missiles from about 100 kilometers from Iran's border, targeting radar sites and other military facilities. Iranian defenses reportedly intercepted several of the missiles, preventing significant damage. In its response, Iran reaffirmed its right to defend its territory and hinted at possible retaliation, though the timing and nature of any response were left unspecified. Iran's government spokeswoman urged citizens to remain calm and follow only official government channels for information. Iran has also issued a warning to the United States, holding it partially responsible for failing to curb Israeli actions and cautioning that continued aggression could result in severe consequences. Iraqi officials have publicly voiced their opposition to Israel's use of Iraqi airspace, stressing Iraq's intent to avoid entanglement in regional conflicts. Israeli and Western media accounts, reports from Israeli and some Western media outlets describe a large-scale operation involving over 100 Israeli aircraft, including advanced F-35 jets. The focus was primarily on disabling Iran's air defenses, radar systems, and missile facilities. Initial strikes aimed to create openings for targeted attacks on specific military installations, though Israeli sources have emphasized that they refrained from attacking nuclear sites in line with U.S. recommendations. While the assault was substantial, Iranian officials maintained that any impact was minimal, assuring the public that civilian infrastructure remains fully operational. Broader regional implications and the path forward. Israel's recent airstrikes on Iranian military targets represent a significant intensification of a long-standing conflict. Iran's restrained response thus far, alongside pledges to retaliate at a time of its choosing, leaves the situation on edge. In Lebanon, Hezbollah, a close Iranian ally, has escalated its own actions by increasing rocket fire on northern Israel. This broader regional friction has drawn the attention of international observers, who continue to urge for restraint and a resolution to the hostilities. The Western response remains mixed, with conservative voices backing Israel's actions and European and BRICS nations calling for a more cautious approach to prevent humanitarian crises, particularly as the situation in Gaza remains a pressing concern. Both Israel and Iran now face the challenge of navigating the fallout from this military action, with the international community watching closely to see how this heightened conflict might evolve.